Morning.
That's where he just goes. He gets the best food.
And then the next morning we got up, Reveille was at 6 o'clock. Went over to the chow hall, standing in line, and discovered all the Yankees were teasing the Southern boys about the Civil War. Seems kind of strange to me. Here we're going to fight World War II, and they're fighting the Civil War. Boot camp for us lasted 3 weeks and 6 days out of a normal 6 to 8 week training period. The Navy needed people so badly because of the, getting into the war so quick. It needed it, and 3 weeks and 6 days was at least that they could do to give us our shots and so on. Well, since I was going to service school, carpentry service school, I went over to a different place than those guys. They went, I'm sure, most of them, I got a letter back from a couple of them, and they were going to our guard duty in the North Atlantic. I think their life expectancy was probably less than 10 days out there in November in that cold Atlantic Ocean. Anyhow, it was about 3 weeks before I got into service school. And I did quite well because I had majored in cabinet making in a vocational high school. And I knew pretty well what they were, even the math I was acquainted with, had some of the same problems that I had in high school. We were getting homework, and I get mine finished, and I noticed this man, probably in his middle 20s, he was having a lot of trouble with these mathematics. He had quit school at 12 years old because his father had died and the family needed the money he could make. So I started helping him with the math, and we graduated. Oh, I'd been in the hospital with scarlet fever. Anyhow, and I didn't know how the graduation things turned out. Turned out that we were both rated third-class petty officers. He graduated with a 4.0, and his teacher graduated with a 3.95. After a short wait, I was sent out to San Francisco, Treasure Island, for General C duty. But I didn't make General C duty. I made temporary duty at the Fleet Post Office, which was not my thing. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to go out and fight in the ocean, Pacific Ocean. So, but I joined the Navy with the idea to keep my mouth shut and my ears and eyes open and do what I'm told. So, of course, that's what I did.
Is that how most of your fellow Navy recruits felt? They all were real anxious to get out of school, out into the battle, right?
Yeah.
And was Treasure Island, was that an actual island, or was that on shore in California?
Yeah.
It was on shore?
Yeah, it was on shore in San Francisco Bay.
Okay.
Had been the site of the World's Fair in 1939.
Wow, okay.
In fact, they were using the old fair buildings for barracks and office, whatever they needed.
Yeah.
So I served over at the Fleet Post Office. The Navy Post Office is entirely different than the Army. When the mail is delivered to the post office, the Fleet Post Office, it's delivered to the sailor. The Navy is responsible for it from that point on. They were not responsible for all these restrictions on packages and so on. Because as far as the civil post office was concerned, it was a civil delivery. So some of the, I was really unhappy, and I told them I was unhappy. So when they needed somebody to guard the front door, they came up and got me to do it. And I stood sentry duty down there, and I had a loaded pistol sitting on the desk in front of me. And at one point in time, we escorted a naval shipment down to the docks and stood guard while they loaded it on the boat. I think it was probably a lot of money.
What were you unhappy about?
Huh?
What was making you unhappy? Having to
Sorting mail.
sorting
instead
them,
of-
just hated the job.
Yeah,
basically.
sorting mail.
Okay. Instead of doing the
I joined the Navy to fight.
right. Okay.
So they said, never mind, black, on the first draft, you're going to be the first name. Well, that wasn't too hard because my name started with B. When you had somewhere around the end of August of this was 1943, I got sent down to San Diego to amphibious school. Now, when I say I'm talking about quite a few other people who are going with me. But this is my story, not their story.
Sure.
So remember that. Well, I find myself in amphibious school. These are the people who run the little boats that run up on shore, and the sailor or the soldiers jump out and run up on the beach. Those boats are made of wood, and they need carpenters to keep them moving. Well, after a short time down at San Diego, which, by the way, I learned to drive on one of those landing crafts because their philosophy was like the Marine Corps. Everybody's a rifleman. On the amphibs, everybody is a boat driver. So we had to learn, and I spent a couple afternoons down in the San Diego Bay backing this thing up because my instructor said, if you can back it up, you can drive it forward. So I got shipped out of there and went up to Camp Pendleton, which is about 30 miles north of San Diego. It's the major Marine base for the West Coast. They do mostly infantry training up there. Well, I got my amphibious training up there along with the Marines. And despite all, most of the sailors disliking Marines, I found that I liked the Marines. In fact, my brother somebody asked me a point here some few months ago what I served in, and my brother butts in and says he was a goddamn Marine. I don't know what he meant by that, but anyhow, we'll get into that later. Shipped out. My great-grandfather had died in the meantime, and one of my uncles who was in the Navy, had kind of an airplane, he was on the Air Force, or the Air Corps, or whatever you call the Navy Force, came out to California to try to find me. Nobody had heard from me for quite some time. Well, I've kind of doubted what he was telling me, till he said, he traced me to Port WWII, which was the CB base, and they told him, yes, I'd been there, no, it wasn't any of his business, go home and forget it. Well, at that point in time, I was down at Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. They were staging us for the Marianas campaign because they had gone through the Marshall Islands so quick and easy that they found they could step up their schedule and go into the Marianas in June or July instead of December.
Okay, let's get an idea what geographic location you're talking about. The Marianas, that's in the South Pacific. Is that below the equator?
The Marianas were in the Central Pacific.
Okay.
They were well up about 13 degrees above the equator on the north side.
And
Guadalcanal.
how far west of Hawaii would that be then?
About 1,000 miles west of Hawaii. 15, maybe 1,200.
It's sort of halfway between Hawaii and the Philippines?
Yeah, just
more
about.
or less?
Just about.
Okay, but north of the equator.
Right. Well, it's a long way to a continent any way you want to travel. Well, we were down, actually we were on Florida Island, which is across the bay from Guadalcanal. And not much to do down there. It's hot. Our uniform of the day was shoes. Nothing else. Whatever you decided to put on, besides the shoes you could wear. And most of us wore bathing trunks and shoes.
What were the temperatures like?
Right?
What were the temperatures?
Around 120.
120?
Yeah. I seen them standing they had a big thermometer on the door of the carpenter shop, about 3 foot high. And I seen it standing at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And you could poke it's raining, you push your arm out into the rain and you couldn't see your hand. That's how hard it is raining. 10 minutes later it stops raining and the sun comes out and it's so foggy you can't see. Anyhow, we stood armed guard duty. There was 2 of us, one from the Army and one from the Navy. And a lot of the times I was the one representing the Navy. My partner was an MP from the military police division and the Army, and he was huge. I was 5'9" at the time, and I would stand in front of him, and I would look at his chest, and he probably weighed 240, 250 pounds. And we'd walk around, there was a movie theater and a pool hall and a couple of other places. And at that point in time, they had no doors on those things. Absolutely. Just open way.
Swinging doors.
You could hear the noise coming from half a block down the street.
Wow.
And we'd get up there close and he'd say, "Wait a minute, Black." And he'd go stand in that doorway. Now the doorway's probably 4 foot wide, 6 feet high, 7 feet high, and he filled it. You could hear a pin drop inside that place, just like that. He'd back off and he'd poke me with his elbow into my ribs and he'd say, "Hey, how about that?" And then we'd laugh.